Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So whether you're a music lover or are just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. So, in today's episode, we're answering the question, can music make you smarter? And this topic has sparked debates for years, from whether listening to Mozart can boost your IQ to whether learning an instrument rewires your brain. We'll explore the science behind something called the Mozart Effect, separate fact from fiction, and look at how music truly impacts our cognitive abilities. So, does playing an instrument enhance brain function? And can background music help you focus and boost productivity? Well, let's dive into the research, debunk some common myths, and uncover what really happens when music and intelligence collide. So, let's start off with what's dubbed as the Mozart Effect. It all began in the early 90s when French ear specialist Alfred Tomati discovered that listening to Mozart's music seemed to have a positive impact on cognitive abilities. He spent decades exploring the connections between sound, hearing, and human health, and his groundbreaking, though sometimes controversial work, laid the foundation for many theories on music's effect on the brain. One of his most famous claims was that listening to Mozart, specifically his sonatas, could improve learning, increase concentration, and even help with conditions like ADHD, depression, and language disorders. He theorized that Mozart's music could stimulate the brain in ways that other types of sound just couldn't. And his rationale was that Mozart's compositions, with their structured and balanced nature, resonated in a way that synchronized with brainwave frequencies, promoting cognitive and emotional benefits. However, the Mozart effect as we know it today isn't exactly what Tomati proposed. He emphasized active engagement with sound as a tool for enhancing well-being, whereas later studies would claim that listening to Mozart could result in short-term cognitive improvements. But his work was a precursor to the Mozart effect phenomenon, and mentioning it helps us trace how the idea evolved, helping us better understand historically how these ideas gained traction in the public consciousness, and how they've shaped ongoing conversations in music psychology. But now for the Mozart effect as we know it today. The term really gained widespread attention after a study done by Rauscher and colleagues in 1993, which explored the effects of listening to Mozart on spatial temporal reasoning. And this refers to our ability to mentally manipulate and visualize objects in space and time, helping us solve complex multi-step problems or tasks. In their experiment, college students who listened to Mozart's music for 10 minutes before taking an IQ test performed better on spatial reasoning tasks than those who had been in silence or just listened to relaxation music. This led to the idea that listening to Mozart could temporarily boost intelligence, and there you have it. The Mozart effect was born. But here's where things get tricky. The media jumped on this concept, sensationalizing the results, and it quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. The idea that listening to classical music could make you smarter became mainstream. But the original research by Rauscher and colleagues didn't claim that listening to Mozart could permanently boost intelligence. Instead, it suggested that a short-term improvement in spatial reasoning could occur immediately after listening to Mozart's music. Yet the media, eager to amplify a catchy story, took this small temporary effect and transformed it into a larger, more dramatic claim that listening to Mozart could make you smarter. Books, CDs, and even companies began marketing Mozart as a tool to enhance brain power, with products ranging from Mozart for babies to Mozart for success. This shift from a therapeutic claim focused on specific cognitive benefits for tasks like learning and concentration to the more sensationalized make you smarter narrative helped the Mozart effect really gain traction. The result was a widespread public belief in Mozart's music as a universal brain-boosting tool, despite the lack of scientific consensus. So, as you can imagine, the excitement surrounding the Mozart effect wasn't quite shared by the scientific community. Researchers quickly raised concerns about the original study's validity. Critics pointed out several issues with its method, like the small sample size and the fact that it focused on just one cognitive task. As more researchers tried to replicate the findings, most were unable to achieve the same results. In fact, follow-up studies showed that the effect was very short-lived, lasting only about 10 to 15 minutes. So, while you might experience a brief boost in concentration or cognitive performance right after listening to Mozart, it doesn't actually last long enough to raise your IQ permanently. Despite the ongoing interest in music's effect on cognition, many experts called for more rigorous, well-controlled studies before making any bold claims. Now, I also want to touch on something that often goes unchallenged in these studies, and that's IQ in itself. Rausch's research measured the impact of Mozart's music on spatial temporal reasoning, which is a component of IQ, and many follow-up studies on the Mozart effect continue to use IQ as a measure. But here's the thing. IQ is a quite limited measure of intelligence, and it's important to question whether it's really the best way to capture the complexity of human cognitive abilities. IQ tests primarily focus on logical reasoning, mathematical ability, and pattern recognition. While these are certainly important skills, they don't account for the full spectrum of intelligence. IQ doesn't measure creativity, emotional intelligence, social understanding, or practical problem solving, all of which play a critical role in navigating everyday life. So, when studies like the Mozart Effect focus on IQ scores, they're only considering a small piece of the puzzle. Plus, IQ scores can be influenced by factors like test anxiety, cultural bias, or even socioeconomic background. A person could do poorly on an IQ test for reasons unrelated to their intellectual capacity. By focusing so heavily on IQ, we risk overlooking the other ways that people process the world. The Mozart Effect's focus on IQ can be problematic because it narrows our view of cognitive improvement. Music, especially Mozart's structured compositions, might help improve focus, mood, or relaxation, all of which can enhance cognitive performance without affecting IQ. It could even improve emotional regulation or social skills, but those things aren't captured by IQ tests. So, in short, relying on IQ in the Mozart Effect research limits our understanding, and we risk simplifying a much more complex picture of what it means to be intelligent. The true effects of music on the brain here might go far beyond what an IQ test can measure, tapping into deeper cognitive and emotional processes that we're only beginning to understand. But further research has pointed to the idea that the effects might not even be about the music itself, but rather the state that it creates in the listener. Classical music, especially Mozart's works, is known to induce relaxation, which can lower stress and improve focus. These effects could lead to better test performance due to enhanced concentration and mood, rather than an actual increase in cognitive ability. Essentially, the benefits of Mozart's music seem to arise from its ability to create a calm, focused mental state, which can improve performance on certain tasks, particularly those requiring concentration or spatial reasoning. Critics of the original study have argued that positive findings associated with listening to Mozart are likely due to enjoyment arousal, which means that the positive effects might stem from the pleasure and emotional response the music elicits, rather than any inherent cognitive benefits of Mozart's compositions. According to this, any cognitive improvement would not occur unless the listener personally enjoys the music. So, if you're not a classical music lover, it might not do anything for you at all apart from maybe slightly irritate you. However, there is research that pushes back against this idea. For example, animal studies have shown that exposure to Mozart's music can lead to measurable improvements in performance, even in the absence of emotional appreciation. In one experiment, different groups of rats were exposed to different music whilst in the womb. One group was exposed to Mozart's piano sonata, another minimalist music by Philip Glass, white noise, or complete silence. After the rats were born and listened to the music for another 60 days, they were tested on their ability to navigate a maze. Now, the group exposed to Mozart's music completed the maze significantly faster and with fewer errors compared to the other groups, which indicates that the Mozart effect might not be simply due to enjoyment after all. Now, I know this experiment was done with rats, which might seem a bit random, but I promise you, we can take something from this. Rats are actually commonly used in psychological research because they share many similarities with humans in terms of brain structure and behavior. Their relatively simple nervous systems allow researchers to observe complex behaviors such as learning and memory in a controlled environment. And they also have a fast reproduction rate and short lifespan, which makes it easier to track long-term effects in a short period of time. These factors make them ideal subjects for studying cognitive processes and behavioral responses, and in this case, they provide valuable insights into how music might influence brain function. But of course, while animal models like rats can provide valuable insights into cognitive processes, human brains are far more complex, and emotional responses, personal experiences, and cultural context play a much greater role in how music impacts us as humans. So, the Mozart Effect, a claim that listening to Mozart can permanently boost your intelligence. While this has been largely debunked, the research does show that music can have an impact on brain performance. The effects are temporary, but Mozart's structured music, which can engage the brain in unique ways, might help with certain cognitive tasks, at least in the short term. And while emotional enjoyment might play a role, it's not the sole factor contributing to the improvements seen in these studies. So, while Mozart might not make you a genius overnight, the research does suggest that music, especially classical music, can play a role in enhancing focus and helping you perform better on certain tasks. Now, I do want to get more into these temporary effects at the end of today's episode, but for now, I want to talk about the ways music can actually enhance intelligence. Let's talk about musical training and how learning an instrument can actually enhance intelligence. It's no secret that playing an instrument requires a unique blend of skills: coordination, memory, concentration, and creativity. But what's fascinating is how these skills translate into broader cognitive benefits. When you learn an instrument, your brain becomes a well-oiled machine, constantly processing complex information. Musical training is a multi-sensory experience that engages multiple cognitive functions and underlying neural networks. It's not just about playing an instrument, it's about activating several parts of the brain at once. Reading sheet music, listening, understanding, and performing all require your brain to process rhythm, sounds, and higher-order perceptual information at the same time. Add to that the fine sensory motor coordination needed to play the instrument, and you've got an incredibly complex activity that requires your brain to juggle multiple tasks at once. Playing an instrument requires a seamless connection between left brain and right brain functions. The left hemisphere, which is often associated with logical reasoning, is responsible for processing structure, timing, and mathematical relationships in music. Meanwhile, the right hemisphere, known for its role in creativity and emotion, contributes to musical expression, tone interpretation, and improvisation. Musicians must develop both hemispheres in a highly integrated way, which is why musical training has been linked to improvements in problem solving, language processing, and spatial reasoning. So, how does learning an instrument actually enhance intelligence? Let's begin by talking about neuroplasticity. And this is the brain's insane ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections in response to learning and experience. This concept is at the heart of how musical training enhances intelligence. When we engage in activities like playing an instrument, our brain physically changes. Practicing a musical instrument strengthens and expands neural pathways, allowing the brain to adapt, grow, and rewire itself. A study from Harvard University found that adults who had started playing an instrument before the age of 7 had superior brain connectivity compared to those who had no musical training at all. This indicates that the benefits of musical training are not just fleeting, they build a foundation for enhanced cognitive functioning throughout life. Research has also shown that musicians have denser grey matter in regions associated with auditory processing, motor control, and executive function, and long-term musical training enhances the connections between the two hemispheres of the brain. And because playing an instrument engages multiple brain regions at once, the cognitive enhancements spill over into other areas of intelligence that aren't music-related. These include memory and learning, attention and focus, problem solving and adaptability, and emotional intelligence. So let's get into each of those. Before I do, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, it would mean so much if you could rate the podcast or leave a quick review wherever you're listening. It really makes a big difference in helping the Sound Mind reach more like-minded listeners just like you. Thank you so much for your support, and now on with the episode. One of the most well-documented benefits of musical training is its impact on memory and learning. When you play an instrument, your brain is constantly at work, encoding, storing, and retrieving information in real time. Every note, every rhythm, every sequence you memorize strengthens the brain's memory pathways. And the type of memory that benefits the most? Something called working memory. And that's a system responsible for holding and manipulating information in the moment, whether it's remembering the next line of a song or solving a complex problem on the spot. Research consistently shows that musicians outperform non-musicians in memory-related tasks. In fact, studies have found that musicians tend to have superior working memory and verbal memory compared to those without musical training. And it makes sense. Think about what's happening when you play an instrument. You're memorizing notes, rhythms, and intricate sequences while simultaneously anticipating what's coming next. Your brain isn't just absorbing information, it's actively organizing and retrieving it under pressure. One particularly fascinating study found that children who received just 2 years of musical training showed an increased activity in the hippocampus, which is a brain region responsible for memory formation and spatial navigation. This suggests that early musical training can lead to long-term structural changes in the brain, improving memory and learning abilities in ways that extend far beyond music itself. And these benefits aren't just limited to childhood. A study from the University of British Columbia found that students with musical training had better reading comprehension than those without. But why is this? Well, learning to read music activates the same neural networks involved in processing language. So when you practice an instrument, you're not just improving your ability to remember melodies, you're also strengthening the cognitive functions that help you process words, understand meaning, and retain information more effectively. For adults, musical training has even been linked to slower cognitive decline. Research suggests that older adults who have played an instrument maintain better memory function as they age compared to non-musicians. And this is likely because musical training keeps the brain active, adaptable, and engaged, essentially building up cognitive resilience that can help delay the effects of aging on memory. So whether it's a child picking up their first instrument or an older adult learning to play later in life, the evidence is clear. Music is a powerful tool for keeping the brain sharp. Now moving on to how musical training can positively impact attention and focus. Playing an instrument is one of the most demanding cognitive activities for the brain, requiring sustained attention and deep concentration. Unlike passive listening, which allows the mind to wander, actively playing an instrument forces the brain to focus on multiple elements at once: rhythm, pitch, tempo, dynamics, and even the physical coordination of playing the instrument. And this intense engagement strengthens the brain's attentional control systems, leading to improved focus and concentration in other areas of life. One study found that musicians have an enhanced executive function, which includes attention control, problem solving, and cognitive flexibility. Musicians were better able to filter out distractions and focus on relevant information compared to non-musicians. This is because musical training strengthens the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for attention and impulse control. One of the most striking examples of this can be seen in children with ADHD. Several studies have explored how musical training helps improve attention in children with attention deficits. For example, after musical training, children with ADHD showed improvements in sustained attention and impulse regulation, similar to the effects of behavioral therapy. The structured, rhythmic nature of music helps train the brain to maintain focus over extended periods, making it a powerful tool for improving attention span. For adults, musical training has been linked to better task switching abilities. This means that musicians are more adept at shifting their focus between tasks, which is a crucial skill in today's fast-paced world. This ability is especially beneficial in professions that require multitasking, from business and engineering to medicine and research. Even listening to music has been shown to improve focus, particularly when performing repetitive or complex tasks. However, active music making provides even stronger cognitive benefits by forcing the brain to practice sustained attention over time, leading to long-term improvements in concentration and mental endurance. Think about how a pianist must focus on two different hands playing different rhythms simultaneously, while also reading sheet music. Or how a violinist in an orchestra must block out distractions and follow a conductor's cues while staying in sync with other musicians. This level of attentional control transfers to everyday life, helping musicians stay focused in meetings, study sessions, and high-pressure situations. Simply put, learning an instrument trains the brain to stay present, filtering out distractions and improving sustained attention, an essential skill in an age of constant digital interruptions. Now, musical training is like a workout for the brain's problem-solving and adaptability skills. Learning an instrument requires musicians to think critically, analyze patterns, and adjust their playing in real time. Whether it's sight reading a new piece, improvising during a performance, or adapting to a conductor's tempo changes, musicians constantly engage in rapid decision-making and flexible thinking. Neuroimaging studies have shown that musicians have greater activity in the prefrontal cortex, which translates to an enhanced ability to adapt to new situations, also being able to think ahead and troubleshooting challenges, both in music and in everyday life. Music is full of patterns, and musicians have to learn to identify, predict, and manipulate these patterns, which strengthens the brain pattern recognition abilities. This skill is also crucial for problem solving in fields like maths, coding, and engineering. A study found that students with musical training performed significantly better on problem solving tasks that required logical reasoning and pattern detection compared to their non-musician peers. And one thing that I think is not often discussed so much is it also equips you with a trial and error growth mindset. Learning an instrument involves constant feedback. You play a note, hear the result, and adjust if it's incorrect. And this trial and error process trains the brain to approach problems with flexibility, encouraging this growth mindset, the belief that abilities can improve with effort. This is particularly valuable in the workplace. Whether you're troubleshooting a tech issue, adjusting a business strategy, or navigating a personal challenge, musical training helps develop the mindset that mistakes are just steps towards improvement rather than failures. The ability to quickly assess situations and pivot when needed is highly valued in business. Many successful CEOs and entrepreneurs have musical backgrounds, such as Jeff Bezos and Paul Allen, which they credit for their ability to think strategically and adapt to change. But whether it's adjusting to new job responsibilities, handling unexpected personal challenges, or thinking outside of the box in a creative project, musical training equips the brain to stay flexible and embrace change rather than fear it. Ultimately, learning an instrument isn't just about playing music, it's about training your brain to be a better problem solver in all aspects of life. And lastly, let's touch on emotional intelligence. I noted earlier that this is one element of intelligence that is not accounted for in IQ tests, so I think it's extremely important to discuss when talking about the benefits of music for the brain and general functioning. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage both our own emotions and those of others. This is a crucial skill in building relationships, communicating effectively, and navigating social situations. Music is inherently emotional. It can evoke joy, sadness, nostalgia, or excitement. And musicians have to tap into these emotions both in themselves and in their audiences. This process strengthens key areas of the brain involved in emotional processing, such as the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, leading to greater empathy, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. Like I said, learning an instrument requires musicians to interpret and express emotions through sound. Whether it's conveying melancholy in a minor key piano piece or excitement in an upbeat violin solo, musicians have to develop an acute sensitivity to how emotions are translated into music. A study found that musicians had higher emotional awareness and a better ability to identify subtle emotional cues in speech and facial expressions compared to non-musicians. This really supports the idea that communicating emotions through music does translate to other areas of life and gives musicians the upper hand in terms of communicating and understanding emotions. Music is also a powerful tool for empathy and social connection. Playing in a band, orchestra, or ensemble requires musicians to attune themselves to each other's emotions, responding to shifts in tempo, dynamics, and expression in real time. Researchers found that musicians have greater activity in the mirror neuron system, which is a network of neurons that help us empathize with others by mirroring their emotions. This suggests that musical training enhances the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, which translates into stronger interpersonal skills and the ability to read emotional cues in everyday life. But beyond recognizing emotions, playing an instrument can also be a form of emotional regulation. Many musicians describe music as a therapeutic tool for managing stress, anxiety, and even depression. The act of playing allows individuals to channel their emotions productively, leading to better emotional control. Playing an instrument reduces levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and increases the release of dopamine, which is the feel-good neurotransmitter. And this helps musicians maintain that emotional balance. Also, musicians are trained to handle performance pressure, which strengthens their ability to stay calm under stress, whether it's during a public speaking event, an exam, or even a high-pressure job interview. Music also strengthens communication and leadership skills. Musicians learn to express themselves not just through words, but through tone, rhythm, and dynamics, which enhances their ability to communicate emotions effectively. Many great leaders, from Albert Einstein to Barack Obama, have musical backgrounds, and studies show that people with musical training tend to have higher levels of emotional intelligence, making them more effective in leadership roles. The benefits of emotional intelligence through musical training extend beyond personal growth. In relationships, people with high emotional intelligence are better at understanding their partners, handling conflicts, and maintaining strong connections. At its core, musical training teaches us more than just technique. It deepens our connection to ourselves and others, making us more emotionally intelligent individuals in every aspect of life. Before we move on, I just want to talk about one thing, which is individuality. Now, I've listed a lot of studies relating musicianship to certain attributes and qualities, but the truth is that there are other factors not accounted for in this. This includes personality, which we focused on in last week's episode, but also cultural factors, gender, and more. There is, of course, more than one explanation for why someone may hold greater leadership skills than another, and I'm not saying that all musicians and vice versa are the same way, but take this as an example of one factor that may give someone a cognitive advantage. After all, we all exercise our brains in different ways, and musicianship is just one example. Now, I want to pivot back to how listening to music can temporarily enhance cognitive functions, such as attention and concentration. As we established in the beginning, while music may not directly make us smarter, it certainly can optimize the environment in which we think, work, and create. Whether you're in a deep work session or tackling a creative project, finding the right playlist to accompany your focus can be a game changer in boosting productivity. So, how can music help you be more focused and productive? Well, it turns out that there is science behind it. In an analysis of over 100,000 songs in playlists curated for studying, working, and focusing, researchers found that the average tempo of tracks is around 112 beats per minute. Now, this pace sits between andante, which is a walking pace, and moderato, which means at a moderate pace. Now, this is important because the music selected for these playlists isn't too fast to cause distraction, but it's not slow enough to put you to sleep. It strikes that perfect balance where it can relax you while keeping you alert and productive. Now, there was another study conducted by cognitive behavioral therapist Dr. Emma Gray, and this was actually done in collaboration with Spotify, and it provides a bit more insight and something a little bit different. Now, they found that music between 50 to 80 beats per minute is particularly effective for focus and studying, and this range puts the brain into what's called an alpha state. Alpha brainwaves are associated with calm yet alert mental states, which is exactly what you need to really zone into your tasks. You know that moment when you're working and you suddenly zone out of the music, yet you're incredibly focused? That's the alpha state at work. It's why so many people swear by lo-fi beats for getting work done. They naturally sit within this range and help you put your brain into that sweet spot of alert concentration. Alpha waves are also linked to those eureka moments, the light bulb flashes of insights that we get when we're working on a problem or idea. So, if you're trying to hit your productivity goals, staying in that alpha state can really help spark creativity and boost focus. There's also the element of how our brains process music whilst working. Since we think, write, and read with words, research actually suggests that music without lyrics may be the best choice for enhancing focus and cognitive performance. Now, this is because when you listen to music with lyrics, your brain starts to process the verbal information, which can compete with the verbal thinking you're already doing while reading or writing. So, music without words can help minimize this interference and allow you to focus better on the task at hand. But here's the thing, music and brain function aren't a one size fits all. Everyone has their own unique rhythm when it comes to focus, so it's important to experiment and find out what works for you. Some people might thrive on lo-fi beats, whilst others might prefer more upbeat tempos. The key is to find a balance between the pace and style of music that helps you get in the zone. Studies like this definitely give us guidelines, but they also emphasize personal experimentation. After all, music is as much about personal preference as it is about science. One personal example is I can work to music with lyrics. Some people think I'm crazy for that, but it just works for me most of the time. But if I really need to do some deep work, I tend to use music in a language I don't understand. I love foreign music, and because I don't actually speak the language, I can continue to focus on my task without having any cognitive dissonance. Now, I always found it fascinating to see what my classmates were working to at university and school. I find it fascinating how our brains all work in different ways and process information differently. Now, there's some really interesting research about how factors such as personality can come into play when choosing music for focus and attention. So, that really just shows the importance of individuality here and finding music that works for you, rather than taking overgeneralized recommendations. So whether you're into ambient sounds, instrumental tracks, or high-energy beats, trying out different styles and tempos will help you discover your ideal soundtrack for concentration. A study actually examined how music activates the brain's reward system, finding that music, particularly enjoyable music, releases dopamine, which is associated with motivation, focus, and learning. So essentially, music that you enjoy can give your brain that dopamine hit, which helps to improve concentration and pushes you to keep going for longer. This might be why we tend to stay in the zone longer when we're listening to music that we like. It's not just about keeping you distracted, it's about giving you that mental reward that makes those longer work sessions feel a bit easier. There's no point blasting out Mozart if you can't stand it, right? So while there's no magic playlist for productivity, there's certainly a lot of research that shows how music can enhance our ability to focus, concentrate, and work more effectively. And the best part? The science is just getting started. There's so much more to explore when it comes to how music interacts with our brains. So to conclude today's episode, we debunked the Mozart effect, explored how learning an instrument can actually enhance intelligence, and looked at how music can enhance focus and productivity. We've seen that while music may not directly make you smarter, it can certainly optimize the environment in which you think, work, and create. And as for you musicians out there, you can now flex to your non-musician friends that your brain is different to theirs, and it may just give you a competitive advantage. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening, and of course, share it with someone who loves music just as much as you do, or may just find it interesting. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And also, come and say hi on Instagram at The Sound Mind Talks. I always love to hear from you. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.